The kid pulled out a gun, he said, "Why'd you hit me?" The barrel said straight for, "Hey young world, the world is yours. Hey young world, the world." Grant, trying to help raise our youth to me. See if the ruler Rick, his face this.
Everything you thought you knew about Slick Rick is wrong. The eye patch wasn't for style. Broken glass blinded him as an infant. The infamous shooting wasn't random violence. His own cousin was trying to kill him first. And the real tragedy happened while he was locked away in prison.
Society wants to hear is, do you feel remorse for what you did?
Yeah, I guess I would say I handled it in an adolescent type of a fashion, you know what I'm saying? I should have handled it in a more, adult fashion,
In 1990, he fired 4 shots at his cousin on a Bronx street corner, hitting an innocent bystander in the process. The hip-hop world thought they knew the story. They had no idea what really led to that moment.
I feel sad inside, you know what I mean? Because I feel like I'm fighting a losing case.
This is the dark truth about how trauma, family betrayal, and survival instincts destroyed one of hip-hop's greatest storytellers. So, let's get into it. Richard Martin Lloyd Walters was born on January 14, 1965, in the South Wimbledon area of London to Jamaican parents who had immigrated to England seeking better opportunities. However, tragedy struck when Rick was just 18 months old, in an incident that would define his entire life and career. A window broke in their home, and a piece of sharp glass flew into baby Rick's right eye, completely blinding him and causing permanent damage that could not be repaired. The injury had devastating consequences beyond just the physical damage. Before medical professionals understood the importance of immediate treatment for such injuries, Rick's partial vision could not be saved because the incident wasn't addressed quickly enough. The trauma left him wearing either dark sunglasses or eye patches for the rest of his life. But more importantly, it fundamentally changed his personality and approach to the world.
Well, I felt like I looked better with the patch than without it, you know what I mean? So it was like when Sammy Davis put on his patch, he had extra, he looked a little more swaggly, you understand? So I just...
The eye injury made Rick extremely shy and introverted as a child. While other kids his age were outside playing sports and being active, Rick stayed indoors and developed a passion for writing stories. This forced isolation became the foundation for what would later make him one of hip-hop's greatest storytellers, but it also created deep insecurities about his appearance and how others perceived him. In 1976, when Rick was 11 years old, his family made the life-changing decision to immigrate to the United States. They settled in the Baychester area of the Bronx, New York, which was becoming the epicenter of a new musical movement called hip-hop. The timing of their arrival was perfect for Rick's artistic development, as he was coming of age just as rap music was beginning to gain popularity and establish itself as a legitimate art form. At Fiorello H. LaGuardia High School of Music and Art, Rick majored in visual art and met another aspiring rapper named Dana Dane. The two became close friends and formed a group called the Kangol Crew, performing in school contests, local parks, and small clubs around the city.
Why's that? Because I'm down with a crew that's called the Kangol Crew.
Rick's British accent, combined with his eye patch and natural storytelling ability, made him stand out immediately in the hip-hop scene. The combination of his physical appearance, his accent, and his unique approach to rap made Rick impossible to forget for anyone who heard him perform. While other rappers focused on bragging about their skills or describing party scenes, Rick was developing a more narrative approach to rap that would later influence countless other artists. His ability to create detailed, engaging stories through his lyrics was directly connected to all those years he had spent indoors writing as a child. The foundation was being laid for what would become a legendary career, but the same traumatic experiences that fueled his creativity would also contribute to the violence and legal troubles that would later derail his success. Rick's breakthrough in hip-hop came in 1984 when he met Doug E. Fresh at a talent showcase in the Bronx. Doug was immediately impressed by Rick's unique style and made him a member of his Get Fresh crew. The combination of Doug's innovative beatboxing and Rick's fresh flow created a chemistry that would produce some of hip-hop's earliest classics and introduce the world to a new style of rap that emphasized storytelling over simple bragging. In 1985, the Get Fresh crew released The Show and its B-side, La Di Da Di, which became international anthems that showcased hip-hop during its formative years.
You know what? La-di-da-di. La-di-da-di.
La Di Da Di in particular became a template that would be imitated, sampled, and referenced by countless future artists. Rick's relaxed British Bronx drawl and his ability to create vivid narratives through his lyrics made him the perfect complement to Doug's percussive beatbox rhythms. The success of these singles brought Rick to the attention of Russell Simmons and Def Jam Records, which was quickly becoming the premier hip-hop label. In 1986, Rick became the third artist signed to Def Jam, joining a roster that included LL Cool J and the Beastie Boys. This signing represented a major opportunity for Rick to establish himself as a solo artist and develop his storytelling style even further. In 1988, Rick reinvented himself as Slick Rick and released his debut solo album, The Great Adventures of Slick Rick. The album was an instant classic that showcased his narrative abilities and established him as hip-hop's premier storyteller. The album reached #1 on Billboard's R&B/hip-hop charts and became one of the first hip-hop records to achieve platinum status, proving that there was a mainstream audience for sophisticated rap music. The album's standout track was Children's Story, a cautionary tale about a young man whose criminal activities eventually lead to his death.
The kid pulled out a gun, he said, "Why'd you hit me?" The barrel was set straight for.
The song pioneered the hip-hop storytelling aesthetic and demonstrated Rick's ability to create complete narratives with complex characters and moral lessons. The track became prophetic in ways that Rick couldn't have imagined at the time, as it seemed to predict the violence that would later consume his own life. Other tracks on the album, including Mona Lisa, Hey Young World, and Teenage Love, showcased different aspects of Rick's storytelling ability and proved that he could handle various themes and emotions. However, some of his songs also contained shocking vulgarity and misogynistic lyrics that were controversial even by hip-hop standards of the time. Treat Her Like a Prostitute became a street favorite, but was refused airplay by most R&B radio stations due to its degrading content. Rick's success came with a price that he wasn't prepared for. His flamboyant lifestyle, including his collection of jewelry, cars, and real estate, made him an obvious target in the Bronx. The eye patch and chains that had helped establish his image now made him stand out in ways that attracted dangerous attention from people who saw him as an easy mark for robbery or extortion. The same neighborhood that had nurtured his artistic development was now becoming a threat to his safety and well-being. Rick realized he needed protection, but his decision about who to trust with that protection would lead to the most destructive period of his life. As Rick's fame and wealth grew, so did the dangers associated with his high-profile lifestyle in the Bronx. His jewelry collection, expensive cars, and general visibility made him a target for criminals who saw him as an easy way to make money. The same flashy image that had helped establish his brand as Slick Rick was now putting his life at risk on a daily basis. He couldn't move around his own neighborhood with the same freedom he had enjoyed during his early days in hip-hop. In 1989, Rick's mother, Veronica, made what seemed like a logical decision to hire family for protection. She brought in Rick's first cousin, Mark Plummer, who had recently arrived in New York from Jamaica to serve as Rick's bodyguard. Hiring family seemed like a smart choice because it meant having someone who would be personally invested in Rick's safety rather than just collecting a paycheck. Initially, the arrangement seemed to work well, Plummer provided the muscle and protection that Rick needed to continue his career without constantly worrying about his safety. However, it quickly became apparent that bringing Plummer into Rick's inner circle had been a serious mistake. Instead of protecting Rick, Plummer began to see his cousin's success as an opportunity for his own financial gain. By 1990, Plummer had become a major liability rather than an asset. He began trying to extort money from Rick on multiple occasions, using his position as bodyguard to gain access to information about Rick's finances and schedule. When Rick realized what was happening and fired Plummer, the situation escalated dramatically. Plummer was unsatisfied with his severance package and felt entitled to more money based on his family relationship. What followed was a sustained campaign of intimidation and violence directed at Rick and his family. Plummer began attempting to rob Rick on numerous occasions, using his inside knowledge to plan attacks. More seriously, he began making direct threats against Rick's life and the life of Rick's mother. The threats weren't empty posturing. Plummer was demonstrating that he had both the willingness and ability to follow through on his words. The situation reached a terrifying peak when Rick discovered bullet holes in his front door. Someone had fired shots directly at his home in an attempt to intimidate or kill him. This discovery made it clear that the threats against his life were serious and imminent. Rick realized that Plummer and his associates were escalating their campaign and that his life was genuinely in danger. Faced with the reality that the police couldn't provide adequate protection and that his own cousin was actively trying to kill him, Rick made the decision to arm himself. He purchased multiple guns for protection, including pistols and more powerful weapons. This decision represented a fundamental change in how Rick approached his safety and marked the beginning of his transformation from entertainer to someone prepared for armed conflict. Rick later described this period as one of constant fear and paranoia. He couldn't trust anyone outside his immediate family, and even some family relationships had become dangerous. The stress of living under constant threat was affecting his ability to work and enjoy the success he had worked so hard to achieve. The hip-hop storyteller was now living in a real-life narrative that was more dangerous than anything he had ever created in his music. On July 3, 1990, the mounting tension between Rick and his cousin Mark Plummer finally exploded into violence on a Bronx street corner. Rick was driving a rented Dodge Shadow with his pregnant girlfriend when he spotted Plummer near East 241st Street and White Plains Road, close to an off-track betting outlet. The moment Rick saw his cousin, he knew he had to act quickly or risk being killed himself. Without warning, Rick pulled out his gun and began firing. He shot at least 4 times at Plummer, with witnesses reporting hearing up to 6 rounds fired. The shooting happened so quickly that bystanders barely had time to react. One bullet hit Plummer in the leg and arm, wounding him seriously, but not fatally. However, another bullet struck an innocent passerby named Wilbert Henry in the foot, creating a second victim in what Rick claimed was an act of self-defense.
Society wants to hear is, do you feel remorse for what you did?
Yeah, I guess I would say I handled it in an adolescent type of a fashion, you know what I'm saying? I should have handled it in a more, adult.
The aftermath of the shooting was chaotic and terrifying. Plummer, despite being wounded, managed to escape by diving into a nearby storefront. Rick, realizing what he had done and knowing that police would arrive soon, fled the scene at high speed. What followed was a dangerous chase through holiday traffic at speeds reaching 80 miles per hour, with Rick's pregnant girlfriend in the car as he tried to escape capture. The high-speed chase ended when Rick crashed his car into a tree, injuring both himself and his girlfriend. Both Rick and his girlfriend broke legs in the crash, and according to officers at the scene, Rick resisted arrest even as he was being pulled from the wreckage. The violence that had been building for months had finally erupted, and now Rick faced the consequences of his actions. Rick was charged with 2 counts of attempted murder and 8 additional weapons charges, including assault, use of a firearm, and criminal possession of a weapon. The district attorney requested an unusually high bail of $800,000, treating Rick like a dangerous criminal rather than an entertainer who had been defending himself. The legal system seemed determined to make an example of the rap star.
I feel sad inside, you know what I mean? Because I feel like I'm fighting a losing case.
While Rick maintained that the shooting was an act of self-defense, the circumstances made his case difficult to defend. The fact that an innocent bystander had been shot undermined his self-defense claim, and the high-speed chase suggested consciousness of guilt rather than the actions of someone who had been protecting himself. The media portrayed the incident as another example of rap music's connection to violence and criminality. Rick eventually pleaded guilty to the charges, accepting a prison sentence rather than risking a trial that could have resulted in even harsher punishment. He was sentenced to 5 years in prison, with 2 years for the attempted murder charges and 3 additional years for disputes with Immigration and Naturalization Services over his residency status as a British citizen. The irony of Rick's situation was devastating. Children's Story, his most famous song, had warned young people about the consequences of criminal behavior and had predicted exactly the kind of tragedy that was now consuming his own life. The man who had created hip-hop's most powerful cautionary tale was now living out his own version of that story, facing the destruction of his career and freedom because of a single moment of violence. While Rick was serving his sentence in a New York State prison, the tragic story of his family conflict reached its most horrifying conclusion. Mark Plummer, the cousin who had tried to extort and kill Rick, met his own violent end in circumstances that were even more disturbing than the original shooting incident. Plummer broke into a family's home and committed the rape of a young boy, but his crime was discovered by the child's father, who shot and killed Plummer in defense of his family. The news of Plummer's death reached Rick while he was behind bars, adding another layer of tragedy to an already devastating situation. The revelation about Plummer's final crime provided some vindication for Rick's claims about his cousin's dangerous nature, but it came too late to affect his legal situation. Rick's time in prison was complicated by his status as a British citizen who had never become a naturalized American. Even though he had lived in the United States since childhood and considered it his home, the Immigration and Naturalization Service began proceedings to deport him after his release. This created an additional 3 years of legal battles and imprisonment beyond his original sentence for the shooting.
You know, it's like I'm gonna get sent to England. All of my family is here, my wife, my kids and everything, my whole ties, my job, you know, everything I built is here.
Despite the legal troubles, Rick managed to continue his music career from prison. He released The Ruler's Back in 1991 while serving his sentence, though the album lacked the polish and creativity of his debut due to the rushed recording conditions.
Rhythm. Now this one here is called The Ruler, my dear. It's a mere party booster that'll...
In 1994, he was granted work release privileges to record behind bars. But these privileges were revoked when immigration authorities decided to pursue deportation more aggressively. After serving his full sentence and being released in 1997, Rick faced continued harassment from immigration authorities. In 2002, 15 years after his conviction, he was arrested again while returning from a Caribbean cruise and detained for 17 months while fighting deportation. The government's treatment of Rick seemed excessive and punitive, especially considering his model behavior since his release and his efforts to mentor young people about the dangers of violence. Finally, in 2008, New York Governor David Paterson granted Rick a full and unconditional pardon for the attempted murder charges. The governor cited Rick's exemplary behavior since the shooting and his volunteer work mentoring young people about violence prevention. In 2016, Rick finally achieved his goal of becoming an American citizen, ending a 23-year legal battle that had consumed much of his adult life. The tragic irony of Rick's story is that the very experiences that made him a compelling storyteller, trauma, violence, and survival, also led to the legal troubles that nearly destroyed his career. His most famous song had warned about the consequences of criminal behavior, but his own life became a cautionary tale about how quickly success can be destroyed by a single moment of violence. At 60, Rick continues to perform and mentor young people, but he remains haunted by the choices that cost him the prime years of his career. Anyway, that's it for this video, folks. Bye!